Are you there, God? It's me, David, and we're going to talk about the new coming-of-age film, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Hey everyone, it's David Stark from Watch Your Past, and I'm here to talk to you about Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, a new coming-of-age film based on the Judy Blume book, coming to theaters on April 28, 2023. It has an all-star cast and an interesting story, and my hot take is, look, I think you should watch it. It is overall just a sweet, heartfelt, and fun story that takes a little bit to get there, but by the end, I loved the ending. I thought the ending was really, really well done, and the cast is phenomenal. So I think you should definitely check it out. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and go into the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers at the ending section, but it's based on a book. You might have already read the book, so there's probably no spoilers there if you know the story. But if you don't know the story, if you haven't read the book, then I would turn this off when I get to the ending section. But don't worry, I will let you know when that happens. I will give clear indicators. Before that, I'll keep it vague. So I will confess, I did not know anything about this movie. I didn't read the book. I've probably read the Judy Blume book at some point, but I'm not certain on that. But I definitely haven't read this one. So I didn't know what to expect. I thought it would be maybe like a religious movie, maybe somewhere in between. I guess I probably should have known when I walked in and they gave Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret wine glasses out. So that was my first hint. But let me tell you, this is a fantastic film. It is a wonderful, like, charming coming of age story. It mainly focuses on the main character, Margaret, who is, I think she's 12 years old in the film. She is moving from New York to New Jersey. She's getting a whole new group of friends and also like dealing with growing up. Like she's in the middle of like her almost teen angst. Everyone is hyper focused on the changes that are happening around them. Like, she's in a class, they're wondering like when they're going to go through puberty, when they're going to start kind of like growing up. And she is like skirting that line between being a kid and growing up. And that kind of fuels a lot of this film. So things I liked about this movie. The first, it's like a really sweet story. Like it is a story about someone growing up and trying to kind of like figure out her place in life and like, when she will become an adult. But it's not just about her. It's not just her growing up. Like the other characters around her also kind of experience growth in this film. There's a lot of changes that happen that are kind of fueling her overall angst. And some of those changes relate to, the family's life situation. Some of those changes relate to new people that are coming into their lives. And all of that leads to this fun coming of age story. The second thing I loved is, look, it deals with growing up. There is definitely a palatable sense of angst and anxiety in this. And they do a really good job of both getting that in here, but also kind of balancing it with the kind of cuter, sweet aspects of the film. So the Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret aspect is like Margaret praise-ish to God throughout, but it's more of like a Dear Diary. Like it lets her kind of like express herself freely and ask things of God, but it's mostly just like her wanting something to happen in her life. And so those scenes especially really help to show the angst. There's some kind of like flustered scenes later when she's dealing with some new personalities. They also kind of show the growing up teenage angst that is part and parcel with growing up. So the third thing I love is, look, this is a fantastic cast. I mean, Ryder Fortson does a really good job as Margaret. She has a tough role because she has to kind of like be the main character and also portray the changes that happen when you're growing up. She does a really good job. I love kind of her journey of discovery in this. But really, Rachel McAdams does a fantastic job as her mother. Like she is so like sweet and genuine and really kind of hits that role perfectly. She is a calming influence, but she also has a lot on her plate, and she deals with a lot of these changes that are happening in this overall story. Like she has moved from New York to New Jersey. She has some changes in her work situation. She has some changes in her interests, and that also kind of helps to fuel some of this like growing up, coming of age story. And the last thing I loved is, look, the ending. It took a while to get there. I will address that in the next part, but I loved the ending. I thought it was a really kind of genuine, relatable ending that I think a lot of people will enjoy. So things I didn't love as much. The first, it is kind of hyper focused, and I say that with a grain of salt because that is the main focus of the film. Like the main focus of the film is growing up, so of course it's hyper focused, but it seems like a lot of the story really revolves around Margaret and her group of friends, like when they're going to get their period, when they're going to kind of like develop, when they're going to become adults. And that takes up a lion's share of the overall, I don't know, time and effort in this movie. It leads to some laughs, it leads to some like fun situations and some drama, but just be aware, there's really a story about young girls kind of growing into adulthood. So there's a lot of focus on the changes to the body, and when that will happen is like a main focus of the movie. So just know that going in. And the second thing I didn't love as much is that it is a fairly slow story at the start. Now, like I said, I loved the ending, so the journey was worth it. But at the start, it kind of starts a little bit hectic and then slows down as we're meeting these characters and dealing with Margaret and her family's new situation. And then it kind of comes together in a really wonderful way at the very end. So that is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It's coming to theaters on April 28, 2023. Like I said, I think you should watch it. It is a fun movie. It has some kind of anxiety in it, and it just has a really great overall ending. So speaking of that ending, I'm going to go into that now. So if you don't want to know what happens in this film, I would turn it off. But again, like, it's based on a book. If you've read the book, you probably already know what's going to happen. But I just want to touch on some things that I really loved about kind of the way this film ended. So like I said, the main focus of this movie is about Margaret and her like core group of friends that she makes when she moves to New Jersey, and when they are going to have their period. That's like the kind of the kind of like catalyst for the other changes in her life, and also like when they're going to develop into like adult bodies and kind of get adult interests and things like that. But another driving force in this film is like part and parcel with Margaret growing up is like her picking a faith. I don't focus too much on that because it's not like a religion movie, but the interesting thing with Margaret is that her mother is Christian and her father is Jewish. And so they fell in love, they got married, they had a kid, and neither of them wanted to kind of like force that religion on Margaret. They wanted to let her kind of choose. So they kind of decided not to introduce any religion into her life and let her choose when she's old enough. So one thing that happens early is that her sixth grade teacher kind of reads something that Margaret wrote and thought it was interesting that she like didn't like religious holidays because she doesn't get them because her parents don't try to like celebrate either of them. And so he tells her that maybe she should explore religion this year. And that leads to her kind of going to different churches and kind of learning a little bit about religion. It kind of ties in with the Are You There, God aspect as well. But she goes to like 4 or 5 different church services just to kind of feel it out, see what happens. But all of this kind of comes to a head when her grandmother, Sylvia, who lived in New York, was very close to her when she was in New York. And now that they're in New Jersey, she doesn't see her as much, but tries to get her up to New York as much as possible. Margaret goes to temple with Sylvia for like a traditional Jewish ceremony. And that was like the first little kicker. And then she starts going to a few other religions. And eventually towards the end, her mother's parents, who have not had any contact with her for many, many years, mostly because they are, I guess, fundamentalist Christian. And when their daughter married a Jew, they just like couldn't handle it and cut her off. Well, they try to start up that relationship. Barbara, who's Margaret's mother, sends them a Christmas card just saying like, how are you doing? And they send a letter back like saying they'd love to visit. They're going to the East Coast and they'd really love to kind of like reconnect. It's been too long. So like, okay, this is sweet. Maybe Margaret will now have another set of grandparents in her life, and that will kind of like help her grow. But that's not really what happens, and I really kind of loved how this set up. They come over and have like dinner with the family, but Sylvia, who is very protective of Margaret and very kind of jealous of her time, but like wants to kind of be around Margaret, also comes over. Margaret was going to go visit Sylvia on a spring break trip, but when Barbara's parents decided to come, they had to cancel that because Margaret had never met her grandparents. They'd never seen her, so they decided to have her stay home when the grandparents come. So Sylvia also shows up, and you have this very awkward family dinner between all these characters who have not spoken in a long time and also have very different religious beliefs and relationships with the family of Margaret. And eventually it's kind of implied that the grandparents decided to reconnect because they want to kind of like nudge Margaret into like the Christian faith. They ask some questions that are like related to that. They, kind of start introducing that, and her parents like cut that off. But Sylvia, who is very outspoken and very fun, she's played by Kathy Bates. She's a lot of fun in this movie. She interjects and says like, no, Margaret is Jewish because she went to temple. And that leads to a whole number of family fighting in this wonderfully hectic dinner scene. It eventually causes Margaret's parents to be like, no, like this is done. Margaret can choose whatever she wants. She can be nothing. She can choose, Judaism, Christianity, whatever she wants. And then Margaret pops in with this like wonderful, tortured, painful monologue about how she doesn't want to choose anything because all she's seen from like religion is that it just causes people to fight, which is a really insightful thought from this person who's been in the middle of that her entire life. I also think she's a little bit upset because she's been praying to God to kind of like have her period happen so that she can grow into a woman, and that hasn't happened yet. So she is just kind of like full of angst and upset about this whole situation. And I liked that. I loved kind of how the parents kind of handled this very difficult situation, like how they kind of put their daughter first and cut off this discussion altogether. And also I liked, how Margaret was able to kind of express herself and voice what she was thinking and kind of cut off all that conversation. So it's a good scene. It's a really dramatic scene. That is kind of the end. Then the next kind of like big part is you see Margaret start to become like her own person. So not only is she's not as much worried about growing up after this, she starts kind of dressing the way that she wants to. Before that, she had been dressing a way to impress her group of friends, but she's starting to like wear socks was a big deal. She's starting to kind of like hang out with other people, and it all comes ahead in this like graduation party where Margaret really kind of grows into her own. She starts dancing with some friends who like weren't part of her clique, but she is, happy to make friends with them and kind of like explore that. And she kind of doesn't intentionally break up the clique, but one of the people from her clique comes and dances as well because she still wants to like dance and have fun and be a kid, whereas some of the other members in her clique like are really trying to kind of be adult, grow into adults and whatnot. So she has this fun dance. She tells her teacher like thank you for the project, even though ultimately it was a sad realization from her religion project where she's exploring religion. I think it helped her grow as a person and kind of like solidify her own beliefs. So she tells her teacher thank you and that he was a really good teacher, which I thought was really sweet. I also really like the teacher played by Echo Callum. He is like this awkward like teacher who is trying his best, and he really kind of comes through as genuine in this film. But all of that happens, but also Margaret's mother, Barbara, has some growth as well. When they originally went from New York to New Jersey, she quit her job. She wanted to stay home, take care of Margaret, and I think she realized that that wasn't exactly what she wanted. I think she liked the idea of it, but when in the actual day-to-day of volunteering for PTA meetings, decorating the house, that wasn't really what she wanted. You could tell that she was not super interested in it. She kind of like let the project languish. She really was a wonderful artist and loved teaching art in New York. But you see at the end, she quits all of her PTA volunteer groups, which she didn't love and kind of like forced her to be a fake person, and starts teaching art in the city. And so she is also growing. One of her former PTA members comes up and is like, hey, we're going to be on the PTA in junior high. I've got 3 committees I think you'd be great for. And she's like, yeah, that sounds great, but I don't want to do it. But thank you. And then just like cuts it off, which was a really fun scene. And also at the very end, in the culmination, right before Margaret is about to go to camp, she finally gets what she's been kind of wishing for the entire movie. But at this point, I think she's mature enough to handle it. She finally gets her period, so she is growing into an adult. But she's had this long journey of discovery to kind of like let her be confident in who she is. And now she's going to enter that next phase as a much more confident, happy person. So that is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It's coming to theaters on April 28, 2023. Definitely think you should check it out. It is a fun coming-of-age movie. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.